this man has influenced and helped just with this program so many Black kids.
Dress for the job you want, not the one you have. The second thing is we tell them the best compliment you'll ever get in your life is for somebody to say you're better than that. Because when they tell you that, that means they believe in you. And we tell them, get up, show up, and dress up. He snuck out the back door of his house and ran from the north side to K College in 10-degree weather.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Coach Rodo's podcast, Win Regardless. Today, I have a good friend of mine who I've known for quite a while. His name is Jim Hess. He is very, very entrenched in the community. And when I say the community, I mean all ethnicities of children. You know, he has a coaching background. He also does real estate. You know, just all around good guy. And I just wanted to have him here so he could, you know, talk about himself, talk about his program, talk about the things that he's done and you know, the impact that it's had on the kids in our community. So go ahead and introduce yourself, you know.
Thank you, Rod. Yeah, my wife and I have been here now for 43 years. We came here from Ann Arbor. I was the women's basketball coach at Western for 8 years. And when that got done, I met Chuck Jakeway, and I've been with Jakeway for the last 36 years.
So now with doing that, what made you transition from coaching basketball? Because, you know, most people who come out of college basketball coaching, they'll go to coaching high school or go to coaching, you know, perhaps go get a job somewhere else coaching or something like that. What made you?
Well, when I got done with Western, there was an article in the paper, and they were looking to do something different. And I met Chuck Jakeway, and Chuck had a very unique approach to real estate. He didn't hire agents from other offices and things like that. He hired ex-teachers, coaches, nurses, and social workers because they knew how to start here to get to here, and knew how to work with people and solve problems. And he built the company with that. And he had because I had 3 or 4 other job offers when I got done, either in the private sector or coaching. And I thought, wow, he has the most unique approach.
Right.
And I have always told folks later on, I moved here to take the job at Western so I'd meet Chuck.
So you've been here, how long have you been in Kalamazoo?
43 years.
For 43 years. So in the 43 years, what is one of the things that you are most proud of that you've done since you've been here in your 43 years?
My wife and I have been able to develop a true understanding of how great this community is. And it's really a unique place. Kalamazoo's a lot like Ann Arbor, where we came from. But, you know, the generosity of the folks who have a lot that they give back, and the schools and things like that, they really inspired us to get involved in the community.
So talk about some of your challenges, not only with work, but, you know, when you were here coaching, coming from Ann Arbor, coming into this community, trying to get this community to accept you and doing so through coaching. What was it like? You know, what did you have to deal with as far as, you know, changing people's minds and getting them giving them a chance to understand and meet you?
Well, in terms of the job I had at Western, it was kind of on the cusp of Title IX and women's sports coming to real, what it should have been all along. And so to get our program off the ground and make it legitimate, the first thing I knew after my first year is we had to get some better players, perhaps. And it's much easier to coach talent. I figured that out real quick. But within a couple years, we were able to turn the program around, and we won the school's first MAC championship. And after that, we were a contender most of the time, and through the support of the community. And then from there, there's a lot of things that transitioned into real estate and establishing that. And then inspired by some friends and teachers and principals that my kids had, is when I chose really to get involved with Kalamazoo Public Schools.
Okay, now as far as getting in better players, how challenging was that?
Well, initially, because my first year, we won 3 games, and I knew that wasn't good enough. But one of the real selling features is, first off, Western really distinguishes itself from the other directional schools like Eastern and Central, the programs they offer. But just as importantly, Kalamazoo is a great place to be. And it's a whole lot nicer place than Mount Pleasant and Muncie and Athens, Ohio, which was our competition.
Right.
And so that part, selling Kalamazoo is an easy part because that's a big part of it. And then what a great, gift Western Michigan is to our community.
So with your coaching and, having that in your background coming up, of course, you must have had coaching mentors or people that kind of helped you shape the kind of coaching person that you would be when you were coaching. Who were some of those people?
Well, my high school coach, Mike Ramker, was my baseball and basketball coach, and he's a Hall of Fame coach. And I learned as much as the basketball aspect, but how to deal with people and get the most out of people and buying into things. So he was probably the greatest influence on me.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I really, really want you to, and I want you to brag about this. I don't want you to be humble, Jim. I don't want you to sit back because I know you. The people who watch my podcast aren't going to know you. And I'm just going to put it out there, y'all, and let y'all know. This man has influenced and helped, just with this program, so many Black kids. I mean, a guy owns a barbershop up in Detroit and is very successful, went through this guy's program simply because I'm just going to let him toot your own horn. Let's talk about this program. You have a program called Breakfast of Champions. I would like for you to brag on it and tell people what it is and what it's about.
Okay. Well, one, at the elementary school where my kids went, King Westwood had an awesome principal, Pat Chalmers. And one of my very best friends, Gary Van Strain, was the head of maintenance at Northeastern Elementary. And Gary had some great programs at Northeastern that he volunteered, got kids involved, used sport and different things to make a difference. And Pat, King Westwood is a unique school in terms of the diversity of racial, economic, social, all those kinds of things go into that. And what I saw with some of the mentoring programs, a lot of them were too big.
Right.
And lost focus. Sometimes they let kids have behavior that's not acceptable. The other thing is that holding kids accountable is important. And they also labeled kids. The kids who did real well in school were called academically talented. The kids who might have had a struggle with parental situations or economic were called at risk.
Yeah.
And I chose to say, we're not going to label kids because eventually you live up to your label. And so that's why we call it the Breakfast of Champions. And everybody's a champion. And like I make the kids wear shirts and ties. And I tell them, dress for the job you want, not the one you have. The second thing is we tell them the best compliment you'll ever get in your life is for somebody to say you're better than that. Because when they tell you that, that means they believe in you. And we tell them, get up, show up, and dress up. And so we do that. And we kept the group at a very manageable, we have 12 kids. Like I said, it's diverse socially, racially, economically, because that's what the real world is.
Yeah.
And they learn from each other.
Yeah.
And so that's been important. And, we've met just a wide variety of speakers from Jim Harbaugh. Today we met with the president of K College. We've met the president of Stryker. We've met Rodney Marshall, former Marine, who had a powerful message for the
Marine,
kids.
always a
Yeah,
Marine.
exactly. So, and then I make the kids, they take notes. They get a notebook. They have business cards. And when they go back and share what they learned from the speaker with their parents, and if they get it signed, I pay them the next week. If they forget, they don't get paid, because that's the real world. And the kids we have in the program are at the perfect age, because they're not little kids anymore, so they can grasp what the speakers are telling them, and they're not to the point where they can get in serious trouble yet. Because sometimes, and we joke, and it's funny, is because when I first started the group, we always, the song, I think it was the OJ's, beware of the handshake that hides the snake, beware the pat on the back that will hold you back. All the parents could relate to it when they come with their kids to our first meeting, and then they go, who are the OJ's? So, and we tell them that, somebody, if you do something not the right way, and so, oh, that's okay. Later on in your life, that's going to catch up to you. So we want to learn those lessons early on. And we've had some great examples. We had a young man who was not a very tall individual in the group, and every speaker would always ask, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he'd say, play in the NBA. That probably wasn't going to happen. And then we had the president of the Stryker Corporation, Jim Heath, speak. And Jim brought the hazmat suit, the Stryker saw, the artificial knee, and he let this young man demonstrate. And then at our next meeting, the speaker was going around the room, and he pointed to the young man. He goes, well, what are you going to be? He goes, oh, I'm going to work for Stryker. He goes, how's that going to happen? He goes, I know the president. And so, when we met Brady Hoke, when he was a friend of mine from when I coached at Western, he took us he spoke at Michigan, and we took the kids over to Ann Arbor. And we got to sing the victors in the game locker room. He asked the kids, how many of you have been into the big house? And none of them. And he said, well, let's go, man. And we ran out onto the field, because some of the young men we have, they're perceived as being street smart, but the only part of the street they're ever on is their tiny little block where they're from. Now, all of a sudden, they're in Ann Arbor meeting the coach of University of Michigan football, running out onto the big house, meeting the president of Stryker, the president of Western Michigan University, who Dr. Montgomery was, the auto czar for President Obama.
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden their world expands, because they can see how big the world really is.
Right.
And not just the tiny little space that they live in. So that's been, it's been a really good focus. And we have a real diverse group of speakers we have, from the jobs that they have, their career paths. And, we've had attorneys speak, and they share their story.
Yeah.
Like today we had Dr. Gonzalez, the president of Kalamazoo College, speak, and he shared his journey from Mexico, how he always believed in education, not to be afraid of meeting someone new who talks a different language from a different place. And the risk he took on his journey in the United States, he said, if you asked me when I was your age, would I ever be the president of K College? He'd say, oh, what's that?
Right.
And so these kids hear that, and they go out, and hopefully, it's always a great thing when I run into the kids who were in the program 10, 20, 30 years ago, and to see what they're doing in their life now.
Yeah. The thing that I like, is one of my favorite stories that you always tell me is about being on time, accountability, which is the one thing that I always talk about when I hold my single podcast. And I talk to, athletes, and I talk to even parents about being accountable. I love the story that you tell about the kid that was late.
Yeah, we had a young man one time, and his situation was kind of difficult. And he and our rule is I show up between 7 and 7:15, and we have two other parent volunteers.
Now, that's you guys driving, not a bus or anything.
Right, yeah. I and my son, Kevin, drives, and we get a parent volunteer. And they have to be ready between 7 and 7:15. And we blow the horn once and wait 2 minutes. And if you're late, we leave. And if you're late twice, you're out of the program, because that's the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And we want them to learn that lesson. We had a young man who had kind of tough, and he was late, and we left. And so our principal, who's great, Pat Chalmers, bought him an alarm clock. I'd call him the night before and say, "Are you ready to go?" And yep. And then one in the dead of winter one time, there was a situation where he just couldn't make it because of some circumstances. I was almost crying when I left because he'd be out. He snuck out the back door of his house and ran from the north side to K College in 10-degree weather because he wanted to be in the program. And I ran into him this past summer, and he's doing great.
See, and those are the type of things that I try to, reiterate about the importance of, being mentors and coaches in the community, that, kids that you don't think that you might reach, or, are unreachable, you reach them in a way that nobody else ever thought that they probably could. And like you said, you just ran into him and now he's doing great. And that is the story that you remember about the what you instilled in this young fella.
Yeah, and the last time we went to Michigan, I've known Jim Harbaugh since he was 7 years old, because when I coached in Ann Arbor, his dad was an assistant coach at Michigan, and he went to it was a Catholic school, so he went to our elementary school, and he spoke, and he was telling the kids, he goes, when I was 10 years old, I went into Bo Schembechler's office and said, "I'm going to be the starting quarterback at the University of Michigan." And he goes, "People laughed at me." And again, we're at the right. Those who stay will be champions sign, ready to go out on the field again with a new group of kids. And he goes, "Men, when you take this field, dream so big, people are going to laugh at you." And again, the kids see that, and that's that whole concept of, how big the world really is, and to think and dream big and not be afraid, and, all those other kinds of things that go with that.
I like that. I like that. Dream so big that people are gonna laugh at you. Cause I got a lot of those laughs myself, and to be sitting where I am, man, I like that a lot. Now, so we transition in cause you still do this, of course, along with your day job. Like, what kind of feeling and what do you take from doing the Breakfast of Champions, from the people that you've met, the relationships and the lives that you've touched? How do you take that into transforming that into, putting people into their first homes? And because I mean, I know that's got to be a hell of a feeling to get a family who didn't think that they'd ever be able to achieve this. Because I know how it was when me and my wife got our first home.
Yeah. That's probably the most rewarding part of our job. It's fun to sell $1 million home, but, when somebody, I had a client that I worked with for almost 2 years, and we sat down. We had a great local lender I worked with, Jeff Wojcik from Horizon Bank, and we put this plan in place. And to see how hard she worked to get into that position, and that's the pure joy of our job. Another, maybe the most rewarding sale I ever had, Mike Brown, who was a former director of the Gospel Mission, he had a veteran that had struggled with drug addiction, homelessness, and he went to the mission, totally changed his life, got everything going, got a job. And again, we spent about a year working, and when he was able to purchase his first home, that's the true American dream. That's
Right.
what we all share. And that is one thing that separates us from a lot of other places, is that you can have home ownership. Other countries, that's not even a beginning of a reality. And here that is, and it cuts across every demographic and all of that. But those truly are the most rewarding times that I have as a realtor.
Well, Jim, man, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out and coming to spend it with us. Is there anything else? Because you're so humble, and like I said, it's hard to pull out about you. Is there anything else that my listeners should know about you, or anything else that you want anyone else to hear?
One, I am far from perfect. I've always enjoyed our talks at the Y. We can sit, and I wish everybody could do this because we cut across all the lines, take down the barriers. I can say something and you don't point a finger at me. You say something and I don't point a finger at you. And if we could have that as a dialogue for all of us, it would be a great place. My wife is real good at that. She's on city commission now after she retired from coaching.
Who will also be a guest.
Yeah, and my son Kevin, who that was my initial retirement plan. He played for the Tigers for a while. Didn't quite make it to the big leagues. But now to see how involved he is in the community, he's on the board for the Promise. He's very active in the community, things like that. So that's been to see the things that my children have.
And then we got the little grandson, Charlie, who's already an ultimate athlete coming up. So we'll get to see another Hess doing his thing around here.
That's right. We're all going to have to go golf, and Rod, he's going to have to give us strokes.
Yeah, he's going to have to give up a couple.
I've seen your swing on tape, and I know mine, so Charlie will have to give us.
Yeah, he'll have us. He'll have us. So, well, again, Jim, man, thank you for taking the time to come visit the Coach Rodo's Winning Regardless podcast, man. And, anytime, you want to come and sit down and chop it up, you just let me know, man. I'd be glad to have you, man.
Oh, our best times with you sitting in the steam room and
solving
all the world's problems.
That's right. If we can only take those, right?
Exactly.
It'd be X-rated, though.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thank you, guys. I would like to tell you I appreciate you guys tuning in to another episode of Coach Rodo's podcast, Winning Regardless. Talk to you next time.
Thanks, Rod.
Thank you, Joe.